On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, I welcome Pete Moris to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. From a small farm in Mount Hope, Wisconsin, to the bright lights of the NFL, Pete Moris built a 17-year career with the Kansas City Chiefs before navigating the uncertainty of job loss and a career change. With grit and lessons learned from early internships, Pete rebounded with stops at Oklahoma and Virginia Tech before landing at the University of Northern Iowa. His story is a playbook on how to go from small town to big time. This will be a good one. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up wherever you are, whatever you are doing? I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the campus of the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls, Iowa. As we look back here, those of you that are on Spotify, we're decked out. I got my cats eat birds shirt on today. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow the podcast on Facebook at Survive and Thrive 8791, the podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you listen to the show. Leave me a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to tell their story, email me at tdecor@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think. Stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will air on Monday and Thursday morning featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as, but not limited to, grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional, setback, mental illness, success despite challenges, etc. Our guests will share how they learned to survive and thrive. This is where we get into our episode and guest intro. According to the internet, and the internet is always right, correct, Pete?
That's a big no.
That's a big no, big negatory, he says. Well, I agree with you because I don't need the internet. I don't need Google. I don't need Alexa. I have my wife, Sarah, and she's always right.
Yeah, that's why you've been married so long.
That's why I've been incarcerated so long. I love my wife, though. According to an AI, artificial intelligence overview, landing a front office job in the NFL is highly competitive, with odds estimated to be extremely low. While it's difficult to put an exact number on the odds, the NFL is a very selective market, and opportunities are often filled by insiders or those with specialized experience. Today, our guest did just that, and he came from a small town, which we'll hear about here in a little bit. And he rose to the ranks, the pinnacle of the sports industry, which we'll address here shortly. Today, I welcome Pete Moris to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Raised on the family farm in Mount Hope, Wisconsin, Pete attended West Grand High School, which is no longer in existence, located in southwest Wisconsin, and is a proud Falcon. After graduating from high school, Pete would take his talents to Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa. He was a four-year member of the men's basketball team and would graduate with a degree in English writing and public relations. His introduction to the NFL, the National Football League, would come as an intern for the Indianapolis Colts. After graduating, the University of Florida in Gainesville would come calling. Pete would then land a job back in the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he would be from 1994 to 2011. After his departure, which we'll talk about, he would run his own business before returning to the college level. He is now the Director of University Relations here at UNI, the University of Northern Iowa. Today, I'm so glad he could join us. Pete Moris, what is up?
Hey, Tim, it's great to have you back here on the campus of the University of Northern Iowa. I love your Cats Eat Bird shirts. So we've got a new model for 2025 that we'll get on you here shortly. But yeah, thanks for driving over and look forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, it was just a little day trip. Although there's a couple things. I'm on my way to the College World Series. Not sure if you've ever been, but I got this weird bucket list of things. I am not a baseball guy. I'm a Brewer guy. I'll watch baseball, but I'm just not a baseball guy. But I've had this on my bucket list for a long, long time. Have you been to the
Yeah, I have not. That's one of the few things on my sports bucket list I have yet to check off.
Including, and I just had a guest on from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Do you know what's held in?
Yeah, the Little League World Series.
The Little League World Series. So yeah, I'd like to get there. I did have to check the weather, though, because I needed to pack. But then I also I also needed to know if I should get my camera gear ready to go and do some storm chasing. We are not in, you told me though, we are not in Tornado Alley.
No, I lived in Tornado Alley. I lived in Norman, Oklahoma. I literally drove by the National Severe Storms Forecast Center in Norman like every day on the way.
With the Doppler radar on top?
Well, and they actually have inside there, Dorothy from the movie Twister, they actually have that in the lobby of the building.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
And just to remind you of where the hell you are.
Listen, I was only there. It was the Friday before the spring football game, and one of my coworkers, actually Mike Hauk, who went to the University of Wisconsin, and he says, "Hey, we got to go." And I thought I was late for a meeting, and we went down into the bowels of the stadium, and it was like Noah's Ark, like the safest place in Norman was under the stadium. And I'm like, "What's going on?" "Oh, there's a tornado coming down Lindsay Boulevard." "Oh, okay." So, yeah, that was my welcome to Oklahoma.
Down in the bunker, did you guys have a couple of weeks worth of food in case you were buried under rubble?
Well, yeah, they had snacks in the operations center. They had all the big screens up. It was like a party, and I'm like, wow, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, I love it. So you just had a couple of high school graduates, correct?
Yeah, we've got two. We've got twin boys who are actually going to be at UNI for orientation coming up.
With summer right around the corner, when I drove up today, and I told you this when I got out of the car and we were walking in, this place reminds me a little bit of Platteville in the summer. When there's no kids, there's really not much going on. But I drove by a couple of pull in here for the volleyball camp, orientations over here, probably football or basketball camp. I saw a tennis camp going on. So there's still people around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And right now, we were going to try to do this, over in the dome. The dome's being renovated. We're going to have all purple seats in there for football season. There's, volleyball camp going on. So yeah, here we are in my glamorous conference room.
Yeah, and if you start to see us start sweating through the shirts, the temperature is rising in this room, but I think we'll be okay.
That's from all the hot air.
That's from all the hot air. Before we get to your story, I need to talk about our sponsor. Our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, are a place that people can escape to. For me, it's a great escape from cooking dinner. Do you cook dinner?
I grill and I smoke. I don't cook.
You grill and you smoke. Two of my favorite foods, grilled and smoked meats, preferably.
Yeah, absolutely.
With their great food and drink menu, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere, people keep coming back. With locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Waunakee, and Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, most communities in the Dane County area, and that's the surrounding Madison metropolitan area, can get to a Buck and Honey's within 10 to 15 minutes. And this is where I do a little drum roll. I'm going to test your table.
Okay.
Not bad. Not bad. Have you been to Buck and Honey's?
I have not been to Buck and Honey's, but I'm going to be in Madison in a couple weeks, and our daughter is a student at UW-Madison, and she said, you need to come to Madison, take me out to lunch for my birthday, so I guess we're going to Buck and Honey's now.
On the podcast, our guests follow the format for sharing their story like this. In segment 1, we talk about what was it like, so we'll get into Pete's history and what happened to get him on the podcast. And there's a couple of things that we can talk about today, and we're going to try to squeeze it in because I only get to see Pete really on social media, but we've talked on the phone a couple of times, so we're going to try to squeeze it all in if we can.
Yeah, you've been over here for a basketball game.
And I will be back for a basketball game. In segment 2, we continue to talk about what happened and then get into what it's like, and then Pete's going to drop his 5 suggestions on us for thriving, and he certainly has thrived from considering where he started, and it wasn't a bad place, to where he is today. He has been in some very cool places. You grew up in Mount Hope, not Mount Horeb, but Mount Hope, Wisconsin. What was life like growing up in Mount Hope? And kind of give us some landmarks first. By the Wisconsin River, close by.
So I can see the bluffs of the Wisconsin River. I can see over in Crawford County. But now, for those of you, we're 20 miles east of Prairie du Chien, probably 90 minutes west of Madison, right on 18.
Okay.
7 miles west of Fenimore, 11 miles north of Lancaster.
You are right in the center of the southwest part. Some great places, Fenimore, Lancaster, Prairie du Chien.
Yeah.
What are you north of?
So yeah, we'd be 11 miles north of Lancaster, so half an hour north of Potosi.
Yeah, you're right in that little hub.
Yeah.
Wazeeka's over there too.
Yeah, Wazeeka's due north on the other side of the Wisconsin River.
Tell us about your family growing up.
So I was an only child on the farm.
How the hell does that happen?
Well, my parents got married a little bit later in life. That's kind of how that happened. And so we did a couple things. We worked on the farm and we went to church, and that was about the extent of the excitement.
Usually parents have a lot of kids because they need a lot of help on the farm. What kind of farm did you guys have?
Well, so I should back up. My mom was one of 14 siblings, and my dad was, one of 7. So, what I lacked in brothers and sisters, I've got over 200 first cousins.
200 first cousins.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Seriously, anytime I'm back there, you'll run into somebody you're really related to.
You have a family of your own, an amazing wife, and 3 amazing kids. Go ahead and spin some yarns about that.
The boys just graduated from Waverly Shell Rock High School here in Iowa.
Twins,
fraternal twins, born the night before a football game in 2006, New Year's Eve 2006. There was a lot of circumstances, for us to make the playoffs. We had to win, which we beat the Jaguars. 3 teams had to lose, which all happened. And I get a call in the hospital from head coach Herm Edwards. Coach, you've got playoff babies.
And did he say, are you coming to work? Or did he say, congratulations?
Oh, he said, congratulations. Now let's get ready for the playoffs.
God. That's just a sample of kind of the life that we're going to be hitting on here.
Yeah. Right. And our daughters, I mentioned she's at UW-Madison.
And tell us what her name is.
It's Madison.
Madison.
Yeah. She is there with Mr. Cheese, the farm cat.
The farm cat. And then the amazing wife.
Lisa's a Southwest Wisconsin native, and she works for the school district in Waverly Shell Rock. No complaints.
No complaints. West Grant High School, Patch Grove. I think I saw they closed in 1998.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So they merged with arch rival Bloomington and became River Ridge. The old West Grant High School is now River Ridge High School.
And you were class of 1989. Are you a proud Falcon?
Yeah, of course. So,
what were you involved in high school? I know I had a small school. I've had a couple of small school people here. You have to do everything. If you don't, things can't get done.
Like, our best sport was basketball, and the girls' program was much better than the boys. But the girls went to state a couple times in the early 80s. Before I got on varsity, I think it was 80, like the 86 team had won the Blackhawk Conference and on the boys' side.
And that was with Shane Ripley, right?
Shane and his dad, Gary, was the head coach. And so Shane later went to Loras, and that's kind of how I got, that on my radar. So
followed in the footsteps of the former star. After high school, you would take your talents to Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa. What was the lure there? Were there any other suitors for your talents?
I think talent is using that term very loosely. Marty Schottenheimer always had a great line about his NFL playing career. He said, I practiced more than I played. That's probably a good way to put it. But
and I got one to share with you that Saul Phillips, who played at Platteville and went on to some really good things. He said, I played Division III basketball, and you know why? Because there wasn't a Division IV.
Yeah, well, Saul, the pride of Reedsburg, Wisconsin, by the way.
The pride of Reedsburg, Wisconsin, yes.
Yeah, so basically it came down to I had a 50% academic scholarship to Loras. It was basically the same money to go to either Loras or Platteville, and I knew I had no chance of ever getting on the floor at Platteville except,
wiping the floor up, kind of like I did?
Yeah, wiping the floor up or working camp for Bo in the summer, which, by the way, it's a Thursday in June, and Thursday night was always the last night of camp, and that meant...
dog track.
Well, no, that was Ron Rainey who would get to the dog track. That meant pizza at the Pioneer Lounge for all the coaches.
Pizza at the Pioneer. You're bringing back some really vivid memories. Not all of them, because we sometimes would have a few too many pops.
Usually that kind of trickled down to 2nd Street and Orville Tees and some of those hangouts.
Ooh, I'm getting tingly right now thinking of some of those places. You earn a degree in English writing and public relations from Loras College. That doesn't exactly speak sports industry. What that speaks to me is writing a book and or being in that kind of profession and then publicizing those books. What kinds of work were you thinking of when you initially chose the degree, or was it something in the sports profession all along?
The backstory there is I was just finished my sophomore basketball season, and Brad Soderberg was the head coach, and Brad played for Dick Bennett at Stevens Point and played with Terry Porter on that team that was in the NAIA finals in 1984.
Those guys were all right.
Yeah, they were pretty good. And anyway, and so, we have the, end of season wrap up and, what kind of expectations are for the summer and enroll and all that sort of thing. And then coach is like, okay, so what do you want to do when you graduate? I'm like, what do I want to do when I graduate? Yeah, what's your dream job? And I'm like, I don't even have a major yet. And so he's like, well, dream job, well, work for the Packers. Okay, well, what are you doing about it? What am I doing about it? I'm like, so he's like, come back in a week.
My first answer would have been, we play touch football in the yard outside the dorm, or we play tackle football when there's snow. That's what I'm doing.
Anyway, so I kind of started doing my homework, and I figured out that, hey, the entryway to the NFL would be an internship. You had to get your foot in the door somehow. Okay, well, what skills do I have that could get me in the door, right? They needed people who would write articles for game programs, right? There was no such thing as the internet as we know it now. I was in writing classes. I was, I had some skill there. And then, I found out there were these folks, the PR people who, kind of worked with the media, who handled publications, who coordinated interviews. And I'm like, that could be interesting. That's kind of what got me pointed towards those majors, which have really been a good combination, those two degrees. So,
internship, it's a good one. That's a good way to get a foot in the door. They don't have to pay you anything, and you're working really hard.
I have the letter that I got from Bob Moore, who was the PR director at the time, in 1994, that I was going to get $700 a month.
Let's do the math. Let's see, $8,400.
Yeah, it was a king's ransom.
King's ransom. So you weren't exactly going to get rich, but you got your foot in the door.
I kind of thought, okay, I have to make myself so invaluable they won't let me leave. And that worked out pretty well for about 17 years.
Yeah, it did. So in 1994, and we're going to fill in some blanks, but you're just going to give, because we're going to talk a little bit more about how you landed with the Kansas City Chiefs. How did you land that job? We won't talk about the other specifics because that'll come here in a little bit, but I want to hear how you landed that job. I mean, storied franchise.
First of all, I'd back up and, we talked a little bit between my junior and senior year at Loras. I got an internship for training camp with the Indianapolis Colts. I was the fourth out of 4 interns hired. I was the only Division III guy. So kind of the same thing. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make myself so invaluable that they have to recommend me for, a job someday. The PR guy, Craig Kelly, who, God bless him, took a chance on me. And, I basically, in the evenings while other people were out, doing whatever, like I was in there grinding on stuff. And like he tells that story 30, some years later. Basically, I was at Florida and I needed my kind of GA was coming to an end, and I needed to get the next thing. And long story, but Craig had put a call into Bob Moore with the Chiefs for me, and so I get a call in the office one day at the University of Florida, and it's Craig, and he's like, I just talked to Bob Moore. If you screw this up, I'm going to kill you. And about 5 minutes later, I get a call from Bob Moore. Hey, talk to Craig, he recommended you, send your stuff to me, and I'll take a look at it. Sent the stuff to him.
In the mail, by the way, right?
Yeah, I think it was, it was like
maybe fax?
Yeah, it was FedEx. And anyway, about a week later, he calls and offers me the job, and I'm like, how soon did he need me there?
I've heard when you were talking about, I'm going to be so busy that it's going to be hard for them to let me go or hard for them to fire me. I heard a story about a guy from Rapids that was working so hard for a football coach up there, and the football coach had fired a bunch of coaches up in Rapids, and he held on to his weight room guy. And my uncle, who knew this guy, said, "Hey, everybody else got fired. How come you didn't get fired?" Well, I was so busy doing work for him that he couldn't find me to fire me. So kind of the same story a little bit.
Yeah.
In 2011, so you're there for 17 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. You and many others are in the Kansas City Chiefs organization are sent packing. And that's probably the nice way of saying it. You were fired.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just you, there were many others. Because our listeners want to hear how this turns out for you and what those 17 years in Kansas City were like, and then how you landed in one of what I consider one of the more successful small Division I colleges in America, UNI, University of Northern Iowa, I need to talk about our sponsor one more time.
That's Buck and Honey's, by the way.
Buck and Honey's, nice intro, has been with the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew since the beginning, with 4 locations in the Madison area. One is always near. People ask why Buck and Honey's. Owner Tom Anderson places a high priority on the mental health of his employees. He has a mental health professional available for them should they need support. I don't know how many businesses go above and beyond their EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but Buck and Honey's does. In 2011, Pete Moris, along with some other front office personnel, are sent packing by the Kansas City Chiefs. After some bouncing around, Pete has landed in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and the University of Northern Iowa. You're going to hear how that all has turned out. Please stay tuned. Don't change that dial. You're not going to want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. We will be back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365 and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency Crisis Services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat, visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios out in Iowa somewhere.
Cedar Falls.
Cedar Falls. We're still here. I'm looking out to see if it's getting dark out there. It's not. The podcast is where I feature guests who share their story in hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. Pete Moris is here today to share his story about he held a job with one of the more storied franchises in all of professional sports and has gone on to, really been really good the last couple of years with the Kansas City Chiefs. However, that all came to an end in 2011. Pete hopes his story will inspire others to dream big like he did and make that reality grow, even though he came from a small town. Since the show has a mental health component to it, did you experience any anxiety dealing with the unknown or depression thinking about what life was going to be like after getting let go by the Chiefs? Let's talk about the anxiety first.
Well, so I think the real anxiety was, before the actual walk in and you have the conversation and they hand you the papers, right? I think we lived a very charmed life in Kansas City for a long time with the same general manager, Carl Peterson. Marty Schottenheimer had been there for a long time as the head coach. When Lamar Hunt passed, that kind of, in 2006, that started kind of turning the wheels of some regime change. Once that sort of happened, and you saw that, okay, well, there's a new general manager. They've got a new, president. We've got a new head coach. And you knew the handwriting was on the wall for people who had been there for a while. And so you just didn't know when it was going to happen. There were a lot of people who were kind of carrying that burden, right? Of, hey, one of these days is going to be my last day. And you just didn't know when.
Dominoes started to fall. And pretty soon you're probably thinking that when's my domino? When's the next one going to fall right next to me? And then it's going to be me.
That's the thing is, people will bring in it doesn't matter what sport or organization it is, right? People will bring in people they are familiar with. And there's also the stigma of being, for right or wrong, being part of the previous regime. It was not a fun time.
The depression. Talk about that.
I think it's more the, that not being able to control be able to control your destiny, right? Fortunately, so Mitch Holthus, who's the voice of the Chiefs, we both joined the Chiefs in 1994. So we were drafted in part of the 1994 draft class of 94. So he's always been a great friend and mentor, and was able to kind of get me to where I could talk to some people and kind of work through some of it, and between a little conversation and prayer and meditation and all that. So anyhow, appreciate Mitch and all the other people who were kind of along for that ride, and were able to come out on the other side.
Let's talk about what you're experiencing, because a lot of the listeners who have listened to a number of the episodes always want to maybe find out what were some of his symptoms of either anxiety or depression. When did you know that maybe I'm not feeling like I did before? What the heck is going on with me? Because 2009, 10, and 11, the cat's still in the bag with mental health, and the stigma is very large. But you've got these things that are going on with you. What were some of the things that were physically going on mentally?
Not being able to sleep at night was kind of the first one. And then, waking up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. And so I went to our trainer and I'm like, hey, is this male menopause or something? What's going on here? And he's like, dude, it's stress. It's like everybody here. You're not alone. This is how a lot of people feel right now in the organization.
You're not the Lone Ranger on this one. There were several others with you.
Yeah, but that was right. Again, going from, one extreme of culture, it's, a lot like going from, right? Think about the contrast in coaching styles between Tony Dungy and Bill Belichick, right? That's a wide gap. Both of those guys won Super Bowls, but there's no one way to do it.
So you talked about a couple of things we're doing. You talked about meditating. You talked about faith. What were some of the things that you were using to, either sleep better or feel better?
One of the things that football in particular is good at is, being very regimented. And, on Sunday you're going to play, and then on Monday there's this, and then Tuesday is the player's day off, and Wednesday they're back at practice, and Thursday is this, and Friday, is the production meeting with the TV crew if you're at home, or you're getting ready to travel on Saturday if you're on the road, and then Sunday you do it all over again, right? I just think, one of the best things for me has always been having a regimented early morning workout. Herm Edwards was a notorious early morning workout guy, and I knew that if I could catch him on the stair climber every morning at 5:30, and I could get on the stair climber next to him and get all the answers I needed to do my job that day. Things like that, being able to get back into a regular workout routine was a big thing.
Everybody's showing up for the meeting with Coach Edwards, and they're looking around, and everybody, where's Pete? And Coach Edwards says, oh, Pete and I talked this morning on the treadmill already. Where the hell were you guys? Did you start to notice, it sounds like you started to maybe notice when you talked to the trainer, your demeanor kind of changed, that maybe you realized, geez, everybody else is having all of these anxiety and depression symptoms. I'm not the only one. Whew. Did anything start to change when you started to talk about your feelings? Because again, that was a really novel concept that hasn't started to come around until maybe the 2015, 20, where people start talking about their feelings.
Yeah, and again, I think the great thing about football is, and team sports in general, but particularly football, is like you have this collective experience, right? That you're at training camp together, and everybody's up early and working all day, and it's late nights, and so I think having that kind of that collective support system around you, that hey, you're not the only one that's dealing with some of this anxiety.
In 2011, you're let go by the Chiefs, and you talked a little bit about that. Is there, what I've heard is you got a pink slip and nobody talks to you. There's a slip in you're let go, pack your bags. Did they send you an email? Did somebody send you a phone call, or did they bring everybody at March? Hey, come on in, we got to talk to you.
No, like everybody, they had scheduled the day where they were going to talk to everybody. I knew I had a meeting that day, but I didn't know what it was about. Then when you figure out that, okay, other people have meetings that day, it's like,
You have this meeting, they sit you down, and you've got a certain number of minutes to get off the property.
Basically, the crazy thing was, this was on a Wednesday. I think it was a Wednesday, and Saturday I was scheduled to go leave to go to Dallas for the Super Bowl and work on behalf of the league at the Super Bowl. They're like, hey, you go do that, right? Because that was going to be where I was going to see all the people that I needed to see about trying to get the next job. Basically, once I came back, I was able to, clean my stuff out with Brian Schaefer, the security guy, packing heat over me.
So what were your original thoughts after you had some time to think about the next chapter? Okay, I'm 17 years. Maybe you shed a few tears because the Chiefs had been good. I'm guessing the Chiefs had been good to you because you stuck around for that long. After you had some time to think, breathe, meditate, work out, what were your original thoughts then?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of time. I mean, right, this is on a Wednesday. I got to leave for Dallas on Saturday, so I've got to get some business cards done up. I've got to get my phone, get a phone and get a phone set up, and so like I got to hit I had about 3 days, and then I was going to hit the ground running in Dallas and schmooze with whoever I could and figure out, okay, well, what's next?
And you weren't wearing Chiefs gear anymore?
No. So the funny stories. So the credentials for the Super Bowl and the media center and all that had already been printed. So I go there and I'm like, well. So I typed up unrestricted free agent and taped it over the Chiefs on the credentials. So that was my way of saying, hey, I'm open for business.
And that's probably a good conversation starter. They're looking, hey, Pete, what's up? What's up with your tag, dude?
Yeah, well, and like everybody knew, like there was no secret. I mean, like there are no secrets and on that kind of stuff. So
you then start your own business in a kind of a media type thing. Explain that. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, basically that was
Morris Media.
Yeah, basically that was an excuse to go to events and essentially try to find the next thing. So I go up to Madison and be in the press box and help keep stats at Badger games, and I did media training for Wisconsin men's, women's basketball and hockey. I think I did media training over at UW Milwaukee for Rob Jeter. Was at the scouting combine in Indianapolis, and the Super Bowl in Indianapolis. And so it was about, hey, I got to, like, you're not going to get a job hiding under the couch and with the blankets up over your head. Like, you got to get out there and talk to people. You
go back to the college ranks where you have been ever since 2011, kind of 2012. Talk about some of the stops you've had.
First, I should probably talk about the job I didn't get, because that was probably...
Oh, yes.
That was probably even worse than getting fired in a lot of respects.
Here, would you turn around? I want to see if the knife is still on your back. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
To kind of set it up, one of the underlying reasons, in addition to the regime change is other NFL teams were also shedding people after the 2010 season in anticipation of the lockout of the players. Basically, a lot of us felt like we were negotiating chips because what was happening, I had a buddy in Denver, same thing happened in PR. There were people all across the league, hey, the Jets let go 12 and, the Rams let go 8. This was kind of setting the stage for when the owners were going to lock out the NFLPA. One of the jobs that I interviewed for that was open after the...
Can I give you a drum roll?
Sure. The 2010 season was the Green Bay Packers. So
Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, so I'm a shareholder. So the Packers win the Super Bowl in Dallas and then part ways with their longtime PR guy, Jeff Blom. So I'm like, holy cow. Now, Mike McCarthy had worked with us in Kansas City, so I knew Mike pretty well, who was the head coach at the time. Knew a lot of people there. Long story short, there was a guy, Jason Weed, who was kind of over their non-football side of the organization. I got connected with him, and I'm like, hey, I'd love to just come up and have lunch or just talk for a day, right? John Schneider, who's now the GM of the Seahawks, was trained by Ron Wolf and, was with us in Kansas City. John was kind of helping me, kind of smooth the rails for me a little bit. Had this really great conversation with Jason Weed, and then the lockout happens, and it's radio silence because...
Crickets.
It's crickets. You want to talk about a summer of, wow. Anyway, then the lockout ends right before training camp, and then they bring 3 of us in for interviews, and then it's the wait, right? I literally was camped out in Green Bay in case they called and said, hey, you've got the job, so I'd be ready to go. And then they call and say, I didn't get the job. And you want to talk about, that was a bigger gut punch than getting fired was, hey, I knew that I was 2 or 3 or 4 finalists, right? And when you don't get it and you thought, hey, I thought I had a pretty good shot at it, but I obviously didn't get it. Now that's the real gut punch, because now, I've been waiting on this until the start of training camp. Well, you're not going to get a job in football now. That kind of beget the media consulting thing to hopefully get me back in the next football hiring cycle.
So you did get back into, I don't know if it was really the football cycle. I'll let you talk about that. But you go back then to the college ranks, not really where you started, but it was like your second job in the sports industry was for the University of Florida. I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about it.
I was fortunate that I was actually at working the Super Bowl, the week of the Super Bowl in Indianapolis, and I get a call. I'd been talking to the University of Oklahoma, and Joe Castiglione was the AD, and I knew him a little bit from his time at Mizzou. Yeah, Kenny Mossman, who I knew a little bit through Mitch. Those guys were pretty good friends, and so he asked me to come down the week of the Super Bowl for an interview, which I did, and I thought it was a really kind of, sometimes you get these signs. So I'm at the airport flying out, getting ready to fly out to Dallas. Who is also in the airport that
Can I take a guess?
You can try. You're probably not going to be right. But
Barry Switzer.
No, I didn't see Barry Switzer.
Troy Aikman.
I've got a lot of good Barry Switzer stories, by the way. But Jason Belzer, who played at Oklahoma, was from Raytown, Missouri, and had played with the Colts. I was an intern with the Colts, and he was getting ready to fly out. He was working for the NFLPA at the time, and he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Oklahoma for a job interview," and that was kind of like fate. Like, okay. Here's Jason Belzer.
And did he say, could I make a call? Do you need some help?
And he's like, let me know if you need anything. So, yeah, fortunately, I landed down there, and, Bob Stoops was a hoot to work for and work with. And, Lon Kruger was the men's basketball coach who is the Kansas State guy along with Mitch. So I kind of had some baked in, relationship there. And, Oklahoma had played a bunch in the Big 12 championship games at Arrowhead. So, and then I found out I was living in the middle of Tornado Alley, the real Tornado Alley.
There you go. Yes. Go from Oklahoma, then you went to
Virginia Tech, yeah.
By the way, I might call you someday because I told you about this weird bucket list I have. And this one's really not weird because I'm a huge football guy.
Yeah.
But I'm calling on you some days because I want to go and watch a game at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place. I mean, it's tough to get to, but
I'm getting tingly now. I want to just go for when the team walks out, and then I might get back in the car and take off. I just want to see that part. All right, so Virginia Tech, give me a 90 seconds at Virginia Tech.
I was at Oklahoma, and it was a good gig, and basically Virginia Tech recruited me. They knew eventually Frank Beamer was going to retire, and they were going to go through a coaching transition, and nobody there, Frank ended up being the head coach at Virginia Tech for 29 years. So they had never.
He was an institution.
Yes. And nobody there had really been through, from a PR standpoint and all the things that go into not only retiring a legend, but also transitioning to, a new staff. And so that was kind of, hey, I had some experience doing that. They liked that I had worked in the NFL, and the woman who hired me, Desiree Reed Francois, who's now the AD at Arizona, had interned with the Raiders once upon a time. So, they wanted somebody with that kind of experience, and it was a great place, fabulous place to live in the mountains of Southwest Virginia.
In addition to the song that they play, is it Enter Sandman?
Enter Sandman, yeah. I was a little bit bitter that, Metallica didn't get there to play in concert when I was there. They were just there, a few weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask that because I know there are some people that are driving. Keep your hands on 10 and 2, by the way, if you're driving and listening. They probably wanted me to ask about what song is that he's talking about? Enter Sandman. And then I got another question for the drivers and listeners. Did you ever get to meet Mike Vick?
Yeah, I've hung out with Mike. That was
former Virginia Tech guy.
One of the things that happened on my watch was, Mike was going to be inducted into the Virginia Tech Athletics Hall of Fame. So Mike did some very bad things, which he has paid the price for, just knowing that, hey, planning that, hey, are you going to have PETA there protesting when you do this and all that sort of thing. But, one of the best guys that came into Mike's life was Andy Reid. Andy, brought him back in Philly, and, was really a guy. And Tony Dungy was another one who, really helped Mike. And I don't know Mike very well, but I know him enough to know that, hey, he's paid his price, and people should let him move on with his life.
Then in 2022, you decide, and we talked on the phone about this, probably the first time we talked, you wanted to get back closer to home. KC, somewhat close. Then you go to Oklahoma. Then you go to Virginia Tech. Indianapolis was relatively close, but you want to get a little closer to home. You're hired as the Director of University Relations here at UNI, University of Northern Iowa. Tell us how that all went down.
Basically, after... So COVID was one of those things that I think changed a lot of people's perceptions about a lot of things.
No way.
Yeah.
Did it really?
The 2020 football season was just incredibly miserable. I mean, so I was in the bubble along with, there were the people that were in the football bubble. We were getting tested 3 times a week. So that Monday test would typically come back on Wednesday, and the trainers would walk out on the field and tap people on the shoulder. You got to go. Fortunately, I never tested positive. The head coach never tested positive. That was one of my biggest fears. Was like, what do we do with the head coach test positive? So then fortunately, some other head coaches in the conference tested positive, and so we kind of had a blueprint. But we went to a game at North Carolina that we should have never played. We were missing 30 guys. Then we got a bunch of people hurt, and that whole thing just kind of jaded me a little bit that wow. Then we come back in 2020. And by the way, when they told us we couldn't come in to that spring, I'm like, shoot, I'm going back to the farm. If I got to work remote, I'm going to work from there. And I'm like, maybe I could make this work someday where I could be back in Wisconsin more and around the family. So
and your 272 cousins, first cousins.
It's 200 and I don't know, 52 maybe.
Okay.
Anyway, so to kind of close the Virginia Tech story, so after the 2021 season, they made the decision to move on from that staff that had replaced Frank Beamer. And I'm like, maybe this is my cue to get everybody back in the Midwest. And, I knew the daughter wanted to go to UW-Madison. So I'm like, if I could get everybody back in the Midwest, and my mom was also, she was in assisted living, memory care, and I'm like, I'd really love to get her back to Wisconsin. So like the planets kind of aligned when this job came open, and God bless Mark Nook, our president, for hiring me.
That is quite the ride. And just being your shadow back in November when you kind of gave me a little bit of the nickel dime tour, it was so cool to kind of see you operate. And then, you got this magnetism with probably everybody. Prior to me calling you on the phone one time or reaching out to you on Twitter, we talked about this. We had never met, but we knew a bunch of guys at the top of the triangle.
Right.
We never connected on the bottom. And here we are, a couple of meetings and some phone calls later. I'm happy to see you. And just the way you carry yourself and the positivity you have is kind of infectious. It was a no-brainer for me to drive all the way down here, and then you just happened to be between here and a bucket list item, and you opened up the place. It's been really cool to see, and it's great. It was great to hear your story on some of this stuff.
I appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll go to Buck and Honey's one of these days in Madison.
Okay.
Or one of their other Dane County locations.
Yes, absolutely. We're almost done. This is where the subscribers, followers, and listeners take out the notebooks, pens, or pencils, and you're going to jot some things down. Now, I'm looking over at a big, thick, about 1.5 to 2 inch binder that Pete has. He, along with me, maybe be able to print that off, and we'll sell that binder to you if you want it. There's a lot of good things that have allowed him to survive and thrive. But here are Pete's suggestions that have allowed him to work his way through the sports industry. Here's what you shared. And I'm going to toss these in underhand softball style. Can you hit a softball?
Yeah.
Here's what you shared. Number one, and I'm going to read these to you, and I'm going to have you hit these in about 60 to 70 seconds.
Yep.
Number one, if you can't be on time, be early. Very first team rule I learned at Loris. Go ahead and hit that.
Brad Soderberg, that was like the first thing he told us in like the very first team meeting as a freshman, and like it stuck with me that particularly in football, you remember Tom Coughlin who coached the Giants? Like if you weren't 3 minutes early, you were considered late to a meeting. And so in the football world, in the sports world, being available and being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, like you think it's pretty easy, but the amount of people who can't do that eliminates them.
Number two, effort. You can't control the outcome, but you can control your effort. Go ahead and hit that.
I've got a list of, you told me I could only have 5, but there's actually a list that I have, and I forget who I stole it from, but it's 10 things that don't require.
Borrow. We all borrow things in coaching.
Oh, okay. But effort, like you can control what type of effort you give. You know when you're not giving 100%. Okay, so you got to be able to control your effort and have the discipline to do that.
Number 3, energy, attitude, passion. However you describe it, you have to bring positive energy to the room. Go ahead and hit that.
Yep. So I'm going to dig in. I've got in this binder you referenced. There's Dick Bennett has in here. Right there's some Dick Bennett. No team can truly be great until it's been humbled. But one of Dick Bennett's commandments is right here. Dick Bennett's principles: humility, passion, unity, servanthood, and thankfulness. Passion, don't be lukewarm. So that was from Dick Bennett's very first team meeting at Wisconsin in 1995, I think. So if you can't be excited about something, how do you expect somebody else to be excited? So as somebody in PR, like that's always kind of been, my thing. And I drink a little Red Bull too.
That was a praise the Lord day when they hired Coach Bennett. It truly was. And then when they hired Bo Ryan, that was, for me, a big Bo Ryan guy.
Yeah.
It was a huge bless the Lord. Number 4. Do extra. The only way to get yourself apart is to go above and beyond what is required. Go and hit that.
The guy I always talk about here is Tony Gonzalez, who was a Hall of Fame tight end in Kansas City. In his rookie year, he led the league in drop passes. In 1997, we'd moved up in the draft.
That's something you don't want to lead the league in.
No, that's a bad category. That's like turnovers. It's like leading the league in turnovers. So, Tony, there was talk, is this guy a bust? Blah, blah, blah. So Tony basically started coming to practice early, catching balls off the jugs machine, staying after practice, having, the backup quarterback throw to him. So his comment was, if you're only doing what everybody else is doing, how are you going to be better? Tony Gonzalez.
And that guy ended up being all right. Hall of Fame all right.
Yeah.
And number 5, do the right thing. You have to trust your gut. Doing the right thing isn't always the easy decision, but your instincts are probably right. Go ahead and hit that.
There's a book by the late Jim Finks, who was an NFL general manager, was actually the GM of the Chicago Cubs when they went to the playoffs for the first time in forever in 1994. And he's got what he calls his organizational commandments. And the last one is do the right thing, right? You have to have some sort of compass of
moral compass I've heard of.
Well, whether it's a moral compass or in sports particularly, like sometimes there's not, I know everybody's all into analytics and everything, but there's times when you can't pull out the book and deal with, there's no script for a situation. Like sometimes you have to be hardwired to know this is the right thing to do.
And you have trusted your gut for, if I do the math correctly,
no, please don't do the math,
about 30 some, going on 30 some years now. And you have, probably because of your personality, your magnetism that you have, but I think it has a lot to do with those 4 things. And really that do the extra of I'm going to work so hard that I'm not going to give them a reason to fire me. I'm going to give them a reason to keep me. And then, you know what? I'm going to be so damn busy, they can't freaking find me to fire me.
Well, and the other thing that's in this book somewhere, it's right there, don't confuse activity with productivity. And I used that the other day in a conversation. And so there's a difference between being busy and being productive. And so that was always my thing, is I was spending time on the right things, hopefully.
And whoever you were with is like, hey, hold on. Can you say that again? I got to write this stuff down. What a great episode. I'm so glad I could join you. Normally it's join us, but join you and the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew today. Your story and how you've seemed to thrive wherever you go has been inspiring. And I'm so glad we have been able to connect and cross paths. Your story reminds us all to have some coping skills and mental health tools in the toolbox, as well as a 2.5-inch binder full of stuff that you can pull out when a person goes through a major change in their professional world. And you did that a couple of times. Despite that, you have adapted and have survived and thrived. Our call to action. Pete Moris just shared his story and what it's like to grow up in a small town on the family farm and make it to the top of the sports industry, the NFL. He's learned the ropes and hopes his story will inspire anyone thinking about a career in professional sports. Here are Pete's 5 suggestions that have helped him survive and thrive in professional and collegiate sports. Number 1, if you can't be on time, be early. Number 2, effort. Number 3, have some energy, attitude, and passion. Number 4, do the extra stuff. And number 5, do the right thing. Final thoughts as we close another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. Are there any final thoughts, Pete?
I wouldn't be doing my job if you've got a son or a daughter or a niece, a nephew, a cousin, a grandchild. Tell them to check out the University of Northern Iowa. It's a great place. I've got 2 sons coming here this fall. So, yeah, I've got to get my own plug in there.
Yes, you do.
The other thing I would say is I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of different groups, whether it's, high school football players. Last week I talked to the Iowa Dairy Princess.
Yes, you did.
Ambassadors. And so when I was sitting in my apartment at Loras College waiting to see if I could get this internship with the Indianapolis Colts, I kind of made a promise to myself that if I were lucky enough to get this internship and this whole NFL path that I had envisioned actually came to fruition, that I would pay it forward and tell people that were my age, hey, here are the things I wish I would have known when I was starting out and trying to get a job and break into the profession. So a little bit of this is me kind of trying to pay it forward and keep that promise to myself that, hey, I would help give others some tips that I wish somebody maybe had given me, or maybe they did give me and I didn't listen.
Well, whenever you decide to write the book on all of your things, I know you have a slideshow, and I love that, looking at that phone last November with all of the pictures you had of different sports figures and coaches, and I certainly would love to take a look at your contact list sometime.
Oh, the boys think that's hysterical. That it's like, why do you have Bill Belichick's phone number? Because I can.
Why do you have Tony Dungy's phone number? On our next episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we will have another amazing guest in the Buck and Honey's remote studios who will share how they learn to survive and thrive. If you have a story to share, or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecora@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.